Hey, good evening, Randy. Welcome to episode 2, everybody, of the 8515 podcast. This is going to be a fun one. The first episode we kicked off with telling you why we're doing this thing, and this is kind of the inaugural first one of doing the thing. So excited about this. Excited as always to catch up with you. So we decided to pick a topic that was very easy, pretty easy to pick a side on, no nuance or anything. Just joking. So we decided tonight we're going to tackle probably one of the biggest things going on in the world right now. Not to be hyperbolic, but the ongoing nature of it, the relevance of it, and then the potential consequence of it. So tonight's topic for episode 2, simply Iran, deterrence, regime change, or another forever war. So there's a lot in that. And it's funny, Randy and I both have looked at this and talked a little bit about it. And just before we were coming on, it's going to be fun to see where we land on this. Probably 6 months ago, we could have picked sides and said how we would land, but this thing's got a lot of different perspectives to be taken. So this should be a fun, even though it's episode 2, inaugural piece of what we're doing. But again, we're going to have a good, respectful. Hopefully, it's a little spirited. Hopefully, we get into the 15 a little bit. I think there will be more 85 than we suspect, but it should be a lot of fun. So, first question I'm going to throw out there, and I think this is a pretty simple question with a really hard answer. And this I just on the way home to do this was listening to some information, and it seems like the more I listen to, the dumber I get on what I actually think about this. But super nuanced. So my first question: what what is actually the American objective here? Is it stopping a nuclear weapon? That's a thing. Is it regime change? That's another perspective. Is it deterrence? That's again another perspective. But what I know is without a clear objective, how do we know what's working? That's a strategic issue. And those are all very different goals just in the few I mentioned. And I'm not sure that any of those three are the real even stated goal, much less the real goal. I don't have any idea just up front, kind of bottom line up front. I have no idea what the heck the real goal is. The more I listen to our president, the more I listen to the people around him, the great Lindsey Graham. That dude's never seen a war he doesn't want somebody else to fight in. He's all in. I listen to him, and there's a lot of even behind the scenes, from what I understand, disagreement on should we be doing this or not. From people like JD Vance, a number of the cabinet members and elected people around Trump are not pro war. He wasn't. And now we find ourselves in the middle of this thing. So what I do know, foreign policy and foreign policy debates, a lot of times you hope for this perfect option, perfect outcome. I don't think that's usually the case. It really is a lot of times what is the best of a number of bad options. And I think that's kind of where we are. And whether we agree that we should or should not have invaded Iran, we are there now. And one of the things I will say, and then I want to hand it over to you, Randy, is I do hear a number of people that I cannot understand this perspective is they're cheering against the United States. Again, whether I think we should or should not have gone, we'll talk about that as we progress through this thing. We are in it, and to cheer against our own nation makes no sense to me. There's a heavy topic on the way home I heard that I want to talk about, and it appears that we probably blew up a girls' school with 170 something girls in it. That's a problem. So I want to talk about that, and even how we deal with that. And there's a lot of rhetoric around that of Trump saying we didn't do it. Well, it turns out us and a handful of countries have tomahawks. Iran doesn't. So it's a very, very complex topic. So I think for our first episode, it's, I wouldn't pick that we would be debating or having a discussion about a war that has huge implications. And at the end of the day, and it's something that Trump said when he was talking about ending the the Ukraine-Russia war, he was asked, what did he think about that? And he said, I think the killing needs to stop. And ironically, no matter what he says, people hate it. But that really is what we should hope for, is there are human lives being lost every day that this continues on. So with that, it's, again, if we're looking for nuance, that's where the nuance over noise and the 15%, there's a lot of nuance in this. I think it's chock full. So turn it over to you, Randy, for some of your initial thoughts, and then we'll dive in.
Okay. Sounds good. You did mention something that I had down here on my list of points, and it's what is the declared purpose of this war and what's our exit strategy? And, you know, I know that it's possible that there is, in fact, you kind of hinted that maybe there's a declared purpose as far as the public is concerned, and then there's the real purpose. I don't believe the government has the right to wage a war without declaring clearly, not necessarily strategy, but declaring very clearly to the American public why we're in this war. We got American lives being lost. We got American resources being spent. We've got the impact that happens economically, sociologically, politically in our country that affects all of us. So you don't get away with declaring a war, getting involved in a war, and not telling anyone why you're involved. You don't have to tell us how you're going to conduct that warfare, but and it seems like the reason changes, every couple of days. I don't think there's any clarity. I don't think anyone has definitively stated why we're involved in this. You are right. You hit on what we hear, and that is deterrence, regime change, or is this just going to be another one of those wars, much like Vietnam and Afghanistan, that seems like they never end? And regardless of how we might try to spin it, those are wars that we did not win, and
Well,
all they
one
did
thing
is
too, and
cost us.
here's the inconsistency, and we talked about this last week or in on the first podcast. The inconsistencies. At first,
Mhm.
it's not a regime change, but yet now Trump wants to have say in who the new regime is, whether it's a regime change or not. We took out the whole regime, so it appears to be by what that is a regime change. I don't know if that was to your point, the intended while we were going in, but that is going to be a consequence. And, then he said he wants to be part of who's picking it. He now doesn't like the next Khamenei. He's not a fan of his. So, it is a regime change, whether we admit it is or we said it was up front, it is now. And he wants to help pick that. Yeah, bizarre, bizarre.
Let me ask you this, Carl, along this line. Why is it necessary for the United States to initiate a regime change anywhere, be it Venezuela, be it in Afghanistan, be it in Iraq? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the people that are being replaced shouldn't be replaced. Why is that? Number one, why is it our job? But number two, I felt for a long time one of the problems that we get into is our arrogance as Americans. We have got to
My
stop.
first two words were going to be American arrogance.
We've got to we've got to stop pushing the US point of view regarding government, societal norms, a perspective of what's right or best on the rest of the world.
Yeah. There's a difference in
What is best
patriot.
for us does not necessarily. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, there's
What's
a
best for the United States is not necessarily what is best for the people of Iran, the people of Syria, the people of New Zealand, for that matter.
yeah, and I think I don't want anybody to misinterpret. I have to think about that. It may actually be more people eventually listen to this than just you and I talking. I don't want people to misinterpret what I say and what I think you mean by American arrogance. I love this country as much or more than
Yes.
anybody in this country. So make no mistake, when I say American arrogance, I'm not saying anything bad about this country or how much I love this country. But just because we love our country and we love what we have doesn't mean it's necessarily right for everybody else. And I've had this internal debate with myself for many years of when do we, because we are the protector of the world, we're the police of the world. I do think to much is given, much is expected. We are the richest nation. We have the most resources. And so when do we, because in Iran, I mean, I don't want anybody to also think we're defending anybody in Iran and their regime, because I have a theory that when somebody says death to Israel, death to America, they mean that. They would take us both off the face of the planet if they could. I do think they're an existential threat to Israel, not so much to us because they can't get to us yet. Another point coming up. But why do we think we're the ones that need to just change a regime? And here's where I get into a dilemma with myself is what justifies that? Is it that the fact that they killed somewhere between 30 and 50,000 of their own people protesting? Again, is that where we should intervene and say we should do something about it? Is it 100,000? Is it a million? We didn't do it with China. They were killing the Uyghurs. We didn't do that. Is it because that would upset the economy? It appears we're selective when we decide we are going to go in and defend people for the good of humanity, which usually results in a regime change. I've also got a tip for any future people that are looking to answer a call when we call and say, "Hey, would you be like the interim guy, maybe the next guy in one of these regime changes?" Don't answer the phone. It's not going to end well for you. You will at some point become the enemy. We will kill you as well. So anyway, just a tip for anybody thinking about taking that call. It doesn't go well, history says, but I think that's
You
a
know, you
great
just
question. I mean,
you just hit on something that I'm glad you brought it up because, according to Human Rights Watch, and you can agree or disagree with their statistics, but North Korea, China, and Russia all have more repressive regimes than Iran. Why are we going after Iran? Why aren't we going after North Korea? Why aren't we going after China? Why aren't we going after Russia? If it's about regime change because of their oppression of their people, the people that they have incarcerated, the people that they have executed, let's start with China. Why are we not
hell of a
doing it?
question.
Because we know that we can't, because we know the consequences of that. It begs the question, then why are we picking and choosing? I look at it from the standpoint of Venezuela. Certainly there needed to be a regime change. And everybody down here in South America, where I happen to reside, for the most part, will agree with that. But is that our role and is that our right? And what is the end game and what is the real reason why we chose to do that other than just to play schoolyard bully and try to prove to everybody else out there that we're the toughest kid in the Western Hemisphere?
Well,
Okay,
you
fine.
you
So we
you
are.
mentioned
We knew
something
that
I
anyway.
think that's yeah, I think you mentioned something that's really important though, and the why. And man, go back to '03 and the weapons of mass destruction. That's what we all bought into, and by golly, back then I was all in. That well, the more we know, and the more podcasts there are, and the more information that comes out, that wasn't the reason. So why did we go do what we did in Venezuela? Well, he was a cartel leader who happened to hijack a country. Okay, and they're importing drugs into the United States. Eventually, they're killing our people. Yep, so is Mexico. Cool. China. Last time I checked, the fentanyl's coming from China. So we're not doing regime change there. So it really what I think we're both hitting at is the part that drives me insane. I think I mentioned this before. Hypocrisy is one of my least favorite things.
Yes.
And when what I see you say doesn't line up with what I see you do, it bothers me. And again, for all the reasons you mentioned, if we're going to rack and stack the number of people getting killed and we're trying to stand up for human rights, it doesn't look like that's why we're doing what we're doing a lot of times. It looks like we find a good reason to go play schoolhouse bully. I think that's getting harder though, because of podcasts, because of information. People are more cynical because of Vietnam, because of the Iraq War, because of Afghanistan, and the number of our freaking heroes who got maimed and the suicide rate and everything that went on through over 20 years of war in the Middle East. I think people are asking the why question more. Why are we doing this? And I think that's the problem this administration's having. I think they're playing a game that came from previous generations and previous it's Trump. Nobody wants to call this a war because you get into war powers and Congress and the Senate, and so today, what did he call it? A little excursion. So this is merely an excursion.
Yeah.
We've lost 7 of our service
Yeah. I was going to
members.
say,
100,
yeah, tell that to the family
170
members.
girls have been killed, and 1,300 people have been killed in Iran, and it's an excursion. And it wasn't an accident. He said it 7 or 8 times. But it feels like this administration is trying to use rules from previous administrations on how you convince a group of, you know, 300, 400 million people that we should go do this. And it's not working. The polls I saw today that are Trump favorable polls, it's about 50 something percent disapprove of this, best case 40 something approve. And that number is diverging quickly for who approves and who disapproves. Yeah, again, that gets back, I mentioned early on the number of questions I've got about why would I think about this? I don't know. It's tough, and especially in the short term, and why we did it now, and the timing of it. That is, I don't have a good answer for why we picked February 28th to go do this thing.
Well, and you hit on something else too, or it begs the question. First of all, is this skirmish? Is this excursion? Is this war an overreach of the president's authority? Now, I know that can be argued politically and constitutionally in a number of ways, but if we can get involved this deeply with this much destruction, I'm not going to say unmerited, but without a direct threat against us, without having to go through Congress, then let's just get rid of the War Powers Act entirely. I mean, is there a certain size? Is there a certain amount of assets, military assets that must be expended first? It appears that we are at a stage now, at least we're testing the waters of whether or not a president of the United States can, of his own accord, for his own reasons, arbitrarily begin military action. And
Well, it
he
sure feels
seems
like
to
we
think
can.
that
I
he
mean,
can.
it seems very political if you really dig down into what is the alignment, and how are we getting there. The votes that happened are along political lines. So
Right.
if the House and the Senate line up with the president, he basically can. And again, not even getting into whether we should or we shouldn't have in this one, but and we'll keep diving through our points. But yeah, I think this one is very intriguing for our nation. I think we're at an inflection point, because it's asked this one, to me, feels like it's asking a lot more questions than any one person group of people have really good answers for. The more I talk to people, the more I listen to people, unless it's, Lindsey Graham, Sean Hannity, Fox seems to be all in right now with this is the best thing ever. But as you go out from that with some critical thinking journalist type people, I think Megyn Kelly's doing a really good job of. Tucker Carlson goes off the deep end. I think Megyn Kelly's doing a good job, and I think both of them have some regret from covering the Middle Eastern wars for 20 years of their career, and being the biggest cheerleaders ever. Megyn has admitted as much, so they're very anti this. Megyn has said, I was listening to on the way home earlier, even though she's not for doing it, she's for the US, and she wants the US to prevail, which again is different than some. But unless you start listening to those type people right now, you've got some people who are throwing in saying it's the best thing. But when you get into those free thinking, podcasting, 2026 type journalists, I don't hear any of those type people that are asking legitimate questions that have even half the answers for the questions they're currently asked.
Right. It's interesting. Uh, Going back to this whole idea of regime change, and since we talk about that quite often as the motivation behind some of the actions that we take and that sort of thing. And this is probably a poor analogy, but I think you mentioned something in our last podcast, which has really stuck with me. This concept of othering other people, people with whom we disagree, maybe people with whom we have profound disagreements. And we become right, they become wrong, they're stupid, they need to change. And if they're not going to change, well, then by golly, we'll go in and change them. Goes back to this idea that we've got it figured out in the United States. Our form of government is the best in the world. Our form of capitalism and economic growth is the example that everyone should follow, although two-thirds of the world does not still, and so quite often we feel the necessity to apply pressure in whatever way that we can. Maybe it's economic, maybe it's military, whatever, so that these poor, wretched people in Saudi Arabia, the women there can have the same kind of freedom that the women in the United States have. And we can truly believe that. But I thought about sort of an analogy. We have people in this country, some whom I know and are very good friends with, who will tell you that the best family model is one where the woman does not have a job. She's a stay at home mom. Her goal in life is to raise a good family and to basically maintain the household. And those same people believe if you're not going to have a family, then don't get married. There's no other reason. And these are what appear to be very rational people, and they may be right. There may be some statistics that would show that that would be better. Those of us who were raised in the 50s and 60s might agree to that. However, imagine if we attempted in this country to force that model on every family, every woman in this country. There's no way we would stand for that. And yet, we don't seem to think that there's any problem with us looking at another country and saying, you're doing it all wrong. And if you don't straighten up, we'll apply the kind of pressure necessary to bring you into our fold. And that creates so many difficulties. I think we're forgetting, I think our leadership is forgetting the impact, both short term and long term, on the average Joe like you and me, people who are just trying to earn a living and raise our families here. And this is going to have an impact on us in many
Yeah.
ways.
Well, and I think that's the interesting thing. I mean, how much of an impact did Iran have on the United States prior to February 28th? Again, they did blow up people in roadside bombs when we were in the Middle East, but in the United States, it wasn't every day that they're impacting us. Was it every year? No. I mean, could they have? Yes. There are people here, they're sleeper cells. They're the biggest funder of state sponsored terror in the world. Everybody knows that. Agree. Got it. But they are going to have more of an effect on our life now. Because we made this decision to do this thing with Israel, now people's lives are being affected. Gas has gone up, things are happening. So we forced a decision, we slash Israel, that there are consequences. And I think the problem is, and this is another weird thing to even try to get your head around. It's easy to look at Khomeini, the one that's gone, and say he was not good. You know, that regime was not good. Got it. Yeah, they're killing their own people, terrorist sponsored, Hezbollah, Hamas. You can list all the bad things. Got it. Okay, so we've tried this in Iraq in '03, and Libya in 2011, and Afghanistan in '01, and it always ends up the same way. I think the other interesting thing is Iran, size-wise, is a big country. 90 million
Yes.
people, a lot of different ethnic factions, a lot of armed militants. The RGC is super powerful. So you look at it and say, this thing's bad. The problem is Trump may think he gets to interview who the next person is going to be, but ironically, early on in the morning after the Saturday night, the Sunday morning press conference, he told the people of Iran, "You have a choice. You need to go pick your leader." And then now he wants to interview him. It's going to be apprentice style, I guess. You're fired. But they have a say, and all those different groups of people have a say in what that's going to look like. So you have this bad thing. You do a regime change, take that out by default, whether we wanted to or not, and then there's a vacuum always. And I think the question, and history says it's not worked out the best. Usually on the backside of the vacuum being replaced, other bad things happen. But we can say, to your point, that the American arrogance, we want a democratic, capitalistic Iran. And I think the people actually want that. That's what makes it even harder is you watch many people in the streets celebrating, and it appears that's what they want. They've got a smart population that appears, if they had the right leader, they could thrive. That seems like the great utopian idea. That's probably the least likely to happen. You're probably going to end up with another military type dictatorship. And that, when I look at honestly what's going on, and we'll see how many rabbit holes we go down, but that's probably the least likely. That's the utopian, that would be great view. It's probably another military dictatorship. I think that may be the second best outcome. I think worse than that, you could end up with a civil war in Iran. You could also end up with a worse regime, which maybe people have a hard time believing. But man, the instability you could end up with in the Middle East, and a different rabbit hole we'll come back to maybe or not. I think that's part of what Israel wants. I think they're not unhappy with Iran firing on the other Gulf states because Dubai and Saudi Arabia and a lot of these Gulf states, they're safe. They're pretty places to go. They're fun to go. They're tourist attractions. And if you really want to be, the king of that area, and Israel really wants to be all those things, which they do have a lot of smart people. They got some beautiful places, but it seems to be a competition. And so if you can get Iran to start attacking those places and make them not as good, I just wonder, and it's, it's what Tucker Carlson brought it up, and I've heard other people, what is Israel's end goal? Because unfortunately now we have a partner in this thing, which is unique to this conflict. When we invaded Iraq and these other places, it was kind of us. We could say when we're going to leave. Well, Marco Rubio alluded to the fact that we finally went in because Israel said they were going with us or without us, and we decided it would be better to go ahead and join them. Well, that means they got veto power when we all kind of pull out. So what is their end game? We're talking about what's our end game. I mean, is it regime change? Is it, what is it? Unfortunately, we've got a partner who's kind of helped us lead into this that what's their end goal? And I'm not sure. I think worse than us not knowing what our end goal is having a partner in this thing that probably I think has a better vision and clarity about what their end goal is.
What
And
there
I don't think
is.
it
Yes.
aligns with
Right.
ours.
Right. Another thing in regard to these sort of long-term ramifications, and it's something that has been occurring over the last dozen years at least, but United States diplomatic influence has been weakened tremendously. And I am concerned that we're going to reach a point where we have alienated so many of our historic allies, where we have refused the traditional forms of diplomacy and basically played the game of we're stronger than you, we've got more money than you, therefore you'll do what we say. Just from a practical standpoint, I can tell you this from personal experience and what I'm seeing from the people around me where I happen to live now. The United States passport almost forever was one of the top 5 most powerful passports in the world. Gave you access to countries with an ease that other countries did not have. Depending on whose numbers and whose stats you're believing, it has now fallen somewhere between the 24th and 30th strongest passport because so many countries now are making it far more difficult for Americans to enter, for Americans to immigrate to, for Americans to have extended visa timeframes and that sort of thing, simply because they don't see any cooperation from their perspective, from a political standpoint, from the United States. My concern is, are we going to reach a point where the only way that we can get anything accomplished in terms of our influence on the rest of the world is through our military might? And that will not, we cannot sustain that. And so I think we need to take some of that into consideration, not only in the decisions that are being made by our government leadership, but how we convey that, how we communicate that, the rationale that we give behind it, rather than guess what? I'm richer than you and I'm bigger than you. So I will do what I feel I want to do. I'm concerned that that's the message that's out there. Whether or not that's the intention is beside the point. This administration right now is the worst for me, and I'm an old man, since the Carter administration in terms of communicating its intent.
Well, I
And
think,
everybody is left guessing. And I understand that that might be a tactic that Trump has had great success in his private life, in his corporate life, keeping people confused, making certain that there's a certain level of chaos surrounding him. I am not convinced that that works in geopolitical arena, and I'm concerned that
well,
that's where it's
here's,
gone.
yeah, I fully agree. Man, we're not getting to a lot of the 15% we disagree on tonight, which is interesting. But here's a question for you, and I what you just said is a good segue into it. And I want to tell you why I think this, because I think up until February 28th, 2026, I think Trump was probably one of the more diplomatic in getting results through diplomacy and a little bit
Mhm.
of confusion, strength, and chaos got it. But the things his Middle Eastern tour, think about a year ago. These Middle Eastern countries are rolling out the red carpet for him. They're giving him fighter jet escorts in. The
Yes.
diplomacy on a world stage and looking at it like, man, he may create world peace. We're not even a year from that. And now we're into the schoolyard bully where what you just said, and it's a stark change from anything he campaigned on, what he said, what everybody thought about what he was going to do, and what he was doing. And the first term was that he was the first president in my lifetime that didn't get us into a new conflict or a new war or whatever in his first term. That was hard to believe, but he did. Clinton, Kosovo. I mean, I've been down the list arguing with people about it. That was shocking. And now we're a year into this. The first year, he was doing a lot of world diplomacy. All these things are good. Even his detractors we're giving him a lot of credit for what he was doing on a world stage, promoting a global peace, peace through strength. And then all of a sudden, this happens. And this is where I think it's interesting is it sure feels like it wasn't his decision fully. So that leads to my question of, is this really about US interest or is this about Israeli interests? And we know that, he's been very sympathetic to Israel. What he did with the Capitol, Jared Kushner, I mean, he's been very sympathetic to Israel. Bibi Netanyahu visited the White House 7 times this year prior to February 28th. And it just, to me, it seems uncharacteristic of not just what he had said, but what he had been doing through his first 4 years, separate 4 years, first year, and then all of a sudden this. And it just, and again, the problem I have getting my head around it is listening to the things he said historically and even the things he's saying now, they don't line up. It doesn't,
Is it
it doesn't,
okay?
it's incongruent.
I agree with you. Is it possible now you're gonna see my cynical side come out. Is it possible that he has just realized in the last 12 months that he's not gonna be reelected because he can't? He can't run again, and that this influence that he felt was going to where he was gonna basically become the 5th president on Mount Rushmore. I think he may be coming across the reality that in 3 years after he has left office, people will have forgotten what he did or didn't do. What they'll remember more is what he did wrong than what he did right. So,
Yeah,
basically,
I don't know if it's,
is he the little boy playing soldier now because he has
well,
the authority to do
the
so,
little,
and he's only got
the
3
little
more years
boy,
to play?
yeah, the little boy piece is what I was about to say, not necessarily playing soldier. And I won't go as far as you did on his full motive of, because I think his legacy is going to be his legacy. He's done a lot of good things for world peace the first year prior to this. I think if he stopped there, it'd be fine. Here's what I think's intriguing. And Iran put out a video of a drone flying over Trump's head, basically assassinating him. Their state put that out. They've been very open about killing him. And so this is where I get to the little boy not playing soldier, but ultimately playing soldier. It's similar to when he wanted to own an NFL team. Good old boys of the NFL didn't want him to own an NFL team, and he never forgot that. During his first administration, one of the reasons he was so hard on the NFL, my opinion, is he never forgot. He's like an elephant. He doesn't forget things, and he's very petty, and he likes to get even in his mind. And I think all of
Well,
his stuff he did with the NFL, he was trying to
he
run
was
them into the ground because they didn't let him in the club.
if you remember, he got into politics because he was the brunt of Barack Obama's jokes
Absolutely. The Yep,
at the national
at
press
the dinner.
at the dinner.
Yep.
You
So
know, you don't wanna
I
poke the
wonder,
bear.
that said, well, and again, go back to just listen to what people say. We don't have to conjecture. Listen to what they say. What did he say? I believe it was late last week, and it was in a interchange with the press. He said, "They tried to kill me, but I got him first." And again, you don't have to conjecture on a lot of these things. He said that. So did Israel, and I think Israel's very shrewd. I think they're smart. They haven't survived surrounded by, it would be like Tennessee being surrounded by Georgia and Kentucky and everybody else that hates them. It's really hard to do that unless you're pretty shrewd and you take care of yourself. I just wonder, the question is, were they shrewd enough to know that Iran is trying to take him out? They figure out his personality, that he is mind of an elephant, doesn't forget things, petty, always wants to get even. Did they use that of, hey, don't forget they're trying to take you out? That's a personal threat. Because the legacy and all that, I don't know. But if I just listen to
Possible.
what he has said and what happens, did they leverage some of, and there's been multiple assassination attempts on that we know about. There's been other ones that we don't know about in plots backed by Iran. Did they use that to ultimately get what they want? Because Iran and Israel hate each other. I think that's fact. I don't know that anybody would debate that, and I think they would both agree. Israel wants them off the map, and I think just as much, I think Iran would like them off the map, and I think Israel would be perfectly good if they're gone. They both are threats to each other. And I just wonder, did Israel leverage that? Because it feels a lot more like it's, again, I the thing, and I mentioned this, I think, on our last podcast, I've not heard anybody in the Trump administration or anybody else in any position of power articulate why this is good for the US. It's good for the Iranian people? Okay, maybe. They got rid of one bad person, and we'll hope to not get another one. Um, they're they're a state sponsor of terrorism. It's better for the region, probably so. I got that. All that seems really good, and you hope that there's regional stability on the other side of this, or a threat to Israel, global energy. All that makes a lot of sense to me. But nobody, not a single person, have I heard yet, and I've heard a lot of people to the contrary explain why this is good for the U.S. Immediately. Again, I want to talk about the nuclear threat a little bit in a minute because there's some inconsistencies in that, but I've not heard anybody articulate why us invading Iran with Israel is better for anybody other than potentially Israel and Iran, and that's yet to be seen.
Right. And it's interesting. As I was looking at this thing, it made me stop, and I'll just ask the question: is what President Trump has done in Venezuela and Iran, and what he's threatening to do in Cuba,
Cuba,
exactly what Putin is doing in the Ukraine, and what China is threatening to do in Taiwan and Vietnam? To me, it's the same playbook. And I don't know the reasons behind either of those issues. The Chinese probably have a greater argument regarding Taiwan than Russia has with Ukraine. I mean, if we allow Russia to use the argument of part of the old Russian Empire and a danger on their border, think about all of the other nations that border Russia as well. And where does it stop? So I don't see a vast difference between what we are doing in Iran and what we're threatening to do in Cuba and what we have at least started doing in Venezuela and what we see these tyrants in Russia and China doing. So, I mean, maybe
super
someone can
valid
explain
point. I
that.
mean, I think if anybody looks at it objectively, China's they believe that Taiwan is part of China. I listened to the entire Putin interview with Tucker Carlson, which I found intriguing because I thought it was it was useful to hear what Putin had to say. And I don't think it's platforming Putin, whatever. I think it's always important to hear what their perspective is. And his perspective was very clear. I mean, he took Tucker way, way back and, many, many, many years ago and explained to him the entire history of Russia, and it's pretty simple. All he's trying to do is put back together what he believes is legitimately Russia's. He's trying to reassemble the former Soviet Union. Okay, that you can say that's good or bad or whatever, but that is his reason. And to your point, is like, what is Trump doing? Does he believe that all of the Americas and Cuba should be part? I don't know. I mean, again, because I see inconsistencies in what we say and what we're doing. And is it just the drug cartels? Again, that's not consistent. Why do we do what we did with Venezuela, not with China, not with for goodness sakes, North Korea, there probably is not a more oppressive. I mean, if we wanted to go rank
Right,
oppressive
right. They're number
regimes for
one.
so many
Yeah,
years, I think they would win that debate every time. They turn
right.
their power off at night. They eat crickets for God's sake. I mean, it makes China seem like they treat their people very well because China and some of these other ones, they only oppress a handful of people that are rising up. North Korea oppresses Little Kim oppresses the entire country to stay in power. So why have we not done anything with them? Is it because they're
Yeah.
not an existential threat to us? Well, they've probably are just as close to a nuclear weapon as Iran is. They've threatened us. So it's hard to understand, to your very early point, why have we reacted to one and not the other one?
And I want us to circle back around a little bit later here to the Shield of the Americas because I've got some thoughts and feelings about that. But let's go to the idea of nuclear deterrence. Okay. We are not concerned about the Iranian Navy coming and landing in California and putting boots on the ground. We're not even concerned
And by the
about
way, I
China
don't,
and
I don't
Russia
think they
doing
have a
that.
navy anymore. We've sunk
I
their
believe you're
entire
right.
fleet, so there is no Iranian navy. So that's good.
So I guess the question that I have is what are we trying to deter? Now, as recently as October of last year, our Defense Intelligence Agency said that they believed that it would be at least a decade before Iran could deliver a nuclear device to the United States. And you think about the advances that this country and more advanced countries technologically will make in the next 10 years. If they're 10 years behind just getting things onto one of their rockets to deliver to the West Coast, how far behind will they be in another 10 years? I do not think there is any credible threat from Iran. In fact, there are only a handful of countries that really, I believe that that would be an issue. Obviously, we know that both Russia and China could reach the United States. We now know that little Kim can do so as well, that North Korea can at least reach the West
Maybe.
Coast.
Yeah. So
Again,
here's a
we're doing nothing to those guys. So what is the argument that we're deterring anything, any nuclear threat from Iran? Now, some people have said, well, they probably have some people, some terrorists already embedded in the United States that can do real damage here. Well, all we're doing is triggering that then, because those people have probably been here for decades. So I don't understand the deterrence at all. I don't understand the rationale behind a regime change, because that has not worked out very well for us historically. Sometimes
so let me
the
hit
new
the
regime is even worse.
Yeah, let me hit your
So I
question on the nuclear thing, because this one is again, just my belief based on my research and listening to a lot of things. I think it's the weapons of mass destruction for the '03 Iraq invasion. I think the impetus for us on this one is the nuclear capability and all. It feels the same thing, and here's again, think about just what President Trump has said. So go back 7 months ago, and what I will stop and say is when our military is on display, holy crap, we're good. The good news
Yes,
I
you're
feel good
right.
about, by the way, when the
Right.
whole stock market's down, the Lockheed, Boeing, Raytheon, Northrop are all up
Yeah, my
when they meet
daughter's
with the president.
portfolio is doing well.
Yeah, we were watching it last week, and the entire market is in the tank. But when Trump's meeting with them and the demand signals are up because we're shooting rockets, things are good. That's a different podcast for a different time with the military
Yes.
industrial complex. But our military, go back and look at what we did 7 months ago to fly those B-2s over there, what they do with refueling. And I do think if nothing else happened during that and nothing else happens during some of this, if we will be careful with how we handle blowing up 170 single digit A's girls and how we respond to that, because I agree with what Megan Kelly said. There is zero chance anybody in this country did that intentionally. Unfortunately, the people we're taking out and some of these others, they would do it intentionally. They built a missile factory next to a kid's school. It appears we screwed up. Okay, we should just admit we screwed up. War sucks, and when you do those things, bad things happen, and apologize for it. Don't do what Trump's trying to do, saying it's the Iranians, and then Higgs is saying, no, I think we're looking into it. That makes you look really stupid. But when you look at our capability and the peace through strength, if we use that properly, man, it's impressive. What we did when we flew those B-2s over there to blow up those bunkers. But here's the problem when we get into some inconsistencies, and you and I have talked about this for years. Trump speaks in hyperbole. So people who take him literally on a lot of things, it's not helpful to them. It makes them mad. He speaks in hyperbole constantly. But it wasn't just him. So 7 months ago, we fly the B-2s over. We drop the bunker busters on the sides of these mountains, and supposedly their words, Trump's words and the administration's words, we obliterated. He said obliterated
Right.
a lot of times. We
Yes, he did.
obliterated their nuclear capability 7 months ago.
I
Seven
was im
months ago.
I was impressed that he knew that word. It was more than 3 syllables.
And it was, yeah. And for him to keep saying it over and over, that was impressive. So we obliterated 7 months ago Iran's nuclear capability. Well, in 7 months, did they reconstitute all that, or did we not obliterate it? One of those two, or they don't have it. Again, back to the inconsistencies. Either we obliterated it, we didn't obliterate it, or they don't have the capability now. One of those three has to be the truth. And so when you look at that, and I think that's interesting too, because maybe we did obliterate it, but and I got to thinking about this today. I was thinking about this at lunch and jotting down some notes. So let's assume we did obliterate it. Intel says we did, got it, even though there were inconsistencies the week after all that happened of whether we really did. What does that even mean? Because you didn't kill all the people. There's still a knowledge. You still have the materials that can be had. You can still weaponize them. So to say we obliterated their nuclear capability, and you said this earlier, you can't do that because you have the smart people, you have the materials, you can weaponize that, and you may have sure, you can through military strikes, you can hit centrifuges, and you can hit labs, and you can hit bunkers that they're doing all this work in, but you can't take out all those people that have the knowledge that were doing it. You can't take out all the materials that were doing it. So you could potentially set them back a year, 5 years, 7 months. I don't know. That seems like it didn't set them back very far if that was the case. Because what I did hear also is a number of people, Steve Witkoff, who I've had the pleasure of shaking his hand, very nice gentleman, said, and others, that we were weeks away from them being able to have nuclear weapons. So again, we either obliterated or we didn't. Maybe they reconstituted all of it in 7 months and they had nuclear weapons, but all that doesn't make sense. It doesn't line up with what we're being told and what we did because there's within 7 months, you've had some major inconsistencies.
And even if they were able to, which I'm in agreement with you, my belief is we did not obliterate them. We did some damage. They very well may be fairly close to having weapons grade material ready to put into a warhead. Then they're going to deliver it by container ship. I mean, really, the one thing that the Defense Intelligence Agency seems to be fairly certain about is that they have no delivery mechanism, and they're not going to get that from the Russians. They are not going to get that from China. They are not going to get what is supposedly exists from North Korea. It just doesn't exist, right? And they're not going to get it from any of the other nuclear powers. So I don't. I'm with you. I don't know where that stands, but once again, it can be one of those rallying cries that you try to foist on the American public that, hey, they were just weeks away from being able to wipe out San Francisco, which I realize some people would say that's not necessarily a loss, but still, I don't think that that rallying cry is going to work anymore.
It's fallen
You talked
apart, and
about
I
the
and I think there's a well, I think there's another point of that too, and this is something I've even changed my mind over the last couple of weeks, is a nuclear Iran bad? I don't know. Because the last time I checked, Russia has nuclear weapons, China has nuclear weapons, North Korea has some version of it, Pakistan has it, India has
India
them.
and Pakistan,
Nobody
who hate one another,
they hate
are
each other.
and
It's
they
like
border one another.
yeah, it's like Tennessee and Alabama hating each other and having nuclear weapons on the weekend that they play each other in college football. They do. But none of them, last time I checked, other than, a couple that were dropped at the end of the World War, none of these countries have blown anybody up. So we use that, and I was part of it as well. I'm like, well, we would have had to deal with them in 10 or 15 years if we didn't do it now. So it's a good thing we did it now. Maybe, maybe if they had a stockpile, they've just got a better seat at the table because we're all sitting around playing poker and we all got our guns on the table and their nuclear weapons, and nobody's going to hit the button first because you're all going to get shot. So again, that to your point, seems like a really good rallying cry to say we don't want a nuclear Iran. Yeah, I think it's probably better that we don't have a nuclear Iran, but I don't know. Is it worth killing 1,200, 1,300 people and 170 schoolgirls and a regime, and then you don't even know what the fallout's going to be? I don't know. And to
Right.
your earlier point, was there because it felt like we were headed down a pretty good path of diplomacy, and then maybe Israel got a little overzealous and said they were going to go, and we said we got to follow you. But man, it sure seems like diplomacy would have been a better way, and that's how Trump had been doing it for the first year of this term of this presidency. And all of a sudden, we went off the rails on that. But if we, because I think most people would agree, any more nuclear countries, I think whether Sweden, Switzerland, they're great countries. Norway, I don't want them having nuclear weapons. I wish nobody had them. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube now; it's out. But I don't think another single country getting nuclear weapons is good. Anybody. I don't think anybody should ever need them anymore. It'd be great if we could make them all go away. We can't. So they are what they are. But, to say all this is justified to make sure they don't get it, was there another way? Did we have to go in on February 28th? Was that the last day? Were they going to, in 2 weeks, were they going to have one? Were they going to shoot San Francisco if we didn't? The February 28th date probably is what bothers me the most of why did that become the day that it just had to happen? We're done. All resources are exhausted. it feels like again, and I think Marco Rubio said this, Israel made the decision they were going to do this, and we were either going to they were going to do it with us or without them, and we decided it was better to be with them than coming in on the back end. That feels like what forced this thing to happen.
Let me ask you this, Carl, and this is going to be nothing but conjecture on your part as well as mine. But we all feel fairly certain that Israel has nuclear weapons. They won't come right out and admit it, but we're fairly certain that that's the case. Is there a fear, and has there been a fear in this country since post World War II, that if we leave it to Israel to protect itself and clean up its backyard, that they might actually not only threaten, but use limited nuclear weapons, given the fact that they are surrounded by countries that basically have sworn to wipe them off the face of the earth? I think that there has been, at least for a while, the United States was something of a buffer. I think in certainly during a certain period of time, we kind of put the handcuffs on Israel regarding what they could and could not do in terms of response. Is there a fear, an inherent fear in DC, that if we don't at least play along with Israel, that things might get more out of control than
And
if
that
we
that begets a whole another podcast. We could start talking about my
probably so.
granddad. So ultimately, the reason George H.W. Bush forced my grandfather, who I'm named after, out of the CIA was over this very topic. It was my granddad, unfortunately, had an alcohol problem, was drinking at a party, and started talking about Israel having nuclear weapons. And that was toward the end of his reign in the CIA. My granddad was forced out by HW because of this very topic. So no doubt they probably do, but it's been a topic. It's been a sensitive topic for a long time of does Israel have nuclear weapons and what are their rules of engagement around them? And is it defensive? Is it offensive? What? I think the one thing most people would agree on with Israel and their survival is a testament to their strength, their
Sure.
intelligence, their military, their might to be as small as they are, man, oh me, and be surrounded by high ground people who hate them. They've survived by not putting up with anything. But I do think there is a fear because, and this is where again, is it good, bad? As the world, protectors that we find ourselves in a lot of times, do we feel like we are somewhat responsible for because we give them their whole military? It's all coming from here. We sell it to them, give it to them, lease it to them, whatever we do. Do we feel a little bit responsible because they are so aggressive to defend themselves that if they pop off a nuclear Armageddon, is our responsibility to kind of keep them in a box? I think that's a great question. Like you said, it's pure conjecture, but I don't think, and I don't even know that that would be an invalid, because again, we have armed them with most things they have, and nuclear Armageddon is not good for anybody. Last time I checked, so maybe that is part of it. That might explain more of this than anything because the thing I would love to have that I don't think if you and I spent another 3.5 hours doing this podcast is why are we really doing this? Again, I can look back to, Iraq and I think W was finishing his dad's thing. There's a lot of things you can conjecture that feels pretty good about it. I think Halliburton had a pretty good interest over there and rebuilt a lot of things after they blew a lot of things up. And, Dick Cheney, you can go back and look at a lot of these. This one to me makes the least amount of sense of a lot of them because it's so uncharacteristic of everything Trump had said and been doing. And it was an immediate about face. And then the things he's saying on the other side of it don't line up with anything before it happened. And it's inconsistent on the other side of it. And it sure feels like this is Israel's thing that we're tagging along for.
It's entirely possible. I'm gonna do an about face here, or at least a strong right hand turn, because less any of our listeners out there think that I am some sort of Donald Trump hater and that sort of thing. That is not the case. It's not somebody I would hang out with. Certainly not somebody I would have my daughter hang out with. But that be that as it may, I will say this: in his two separate terms as president, my bank account grew and my tax bite lessened. So, he's got that going for him. But I do want to just mention, and this could be another discussion at another time, the Shield of the Americas. Now, you and I talked about this months ago, many months ago. We were raising the question between ourselves and along with our friend Bob Woods about why are we spending so much time and so many of our resources protecting areas of Europe, areas of Southeast Asia, and areas of the Middle East, and not spending more time and energy on protecting our Western Hemisphere, with the belief that, barring something like, you know, nuclear weapons delivered by missiles, the if we had an alliance, a true close alliance between all of the countries in South, Central, and North America, all the way up to, well, from the one pole to the other, it would be a formidable landmass that, quite honestly, I don't think anybody in the world could touch. And yet we seem to kind of abandon that for decades, really, other than to create hotspots and problems in a lot of areas for a variety of reasons. We have done our best in the last, well, 8 of the last 12 years to alienate our friends to the north in Canada for whatever reasons, with a huge landmass that goes from border to border for us. We've done nothing to try to influence more strongly what's happening on our southern border from a geopolitical standpoint, rather than just building a big wall. But I'm going to give the president at least a partial kudo for at least the idea of the Shield of the Americas. And what I like about it, to me, number one, it makes a whole lot more sense and would be a far more rational approach and manageable approach to ensuring America's security. Number one, I like the fact that, at least ostensibly, this is something that South American and Central American countries can choose to join or choose not to. I believe 13 have, and quite a number have. Most of the ones that have not have been either Mexico or they've been the very liberal left leaning governments. They were invited. They appear to be at least intending to create some sort of solidarity from a political and military standpoint. Living where I do in Ecuador, I have seen a country that has been used by the cartels and abused by the cartels, and fell from the safest South American country to the most dangerous South American country in about a 4-year period of time. So I've seen what can happen. I understand the primary purpose of this is to create sort of a combined effort to combat the cartels and their influence. Certainly, the U.S. involvement in that gives it validity, gives it a certain amount of weight, and so I'm very, very appreciative of that. One thing that I want to throw out there, though, and again, it's typical of our president and the way that he operates, but I understand that in the little confab that they had over the weekend down in Florida regarding this, he made the comment that he was not going to learn their language. Now, I know Trump meant this as a joke, and I'm sure everybody had a good laugh, but he needs to make certain that he doesn't dismiss the inherent danger of not learning about the culture, because Central and South America are never going to become the United States, nor should they. They are going to be different. They are motivated by different things. They have a different culture. They have a different history. Their socioeconomic needs are far different than what they are in the United States. And let's face it, I live in a third world country. Most of South and Central America are emerging nations. And so I like the direction he's going. To me, it makes a whole lot more sense than the amount of resources that we are spending in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East. And I could be wrong, and certainly I don't have all of the inner knowledge of what's going on worldwide. But I did want to give kudos to the president for at least the effort here. We'll see if anything
Yeah.
good comes of it. And I will say that I'm in a country where my president here in this country is in lockstep with President Trump.
Yeah.
He loves him.
Well, and I
They
think,
love one another. They work together. Although I will tell you this, and I think you and I have had this discussion a few months ago. We had an election here in Ecuador, and we have a very conservative president, very young, NYU educated, that sort of thing, that had a couple of amendments on the ballot. One to strengthen the independent authorities of the president, and the other to allow foreign governments to have military presence, military bases in Ecuador, which used to exist here at one point in time. There was a U.S. Air Force base down off the coast of Manta. That was defeated 60% to 40%. So even though the people in this country respect and are following to a certain extent their president, they are very, very independent. They are not going to follow in lockstep to, you know, even someone that they elected with a fairly decent majority just a year prior. These are things that need to be understood rather than we will simply go in, we will take out Maduro in Venezuela, we'll put in our guy, and we will veto anyone else that wants to go in there. If you want to end up with the same kind of problems that we had in the 60s and 70s in South and Central America, head on down that path.
Yeah.
Waste your resources, waste your time, and ruin a lot of goodwill. So I think this is a good idea. I think maybe it's moving in the right direction. Let's see how it turns out.
Yeah. And I want to circle back on one thing. And I want to hit that. I think you hit a lot of good things in there. One last point, kind of on the Iran thing that I wanted to make is the forever war part of it.
Yes,
Trump
thank
was
you.
going to get us out of all the forever wars and all the administration. We're not going to do that. Well, I think one thing, you know, being naive, criticizing everybody who did these before, I doubt seriously that any president in the past who decided to do an invasion, excursion, incursion, whatever the heck they want to make the term be to not call it a war. I doubt any of them started out on day one and thought, man, if we could just get this thing to drag out 20 years and we could lose thousands of soldiers, that would be great. That's not what they do. It all starts out we're really good in going into these other countries and kicking their ass because we got better fighter jets, we got better technology. And then the piece that we never take into account is that country, those people have a say as well. And they get a say as to when it ends. Once we may get to start it, but they have a real vote into when this thing ends. And again, I don't think the Bushes or anybody else hoped, or Dick Cheney, none of them said, hey, let's start a 20-year war. And then let's withdraw in a real terrible fashion and just make it a train wreck. So, to say that you don't like Forever Wars, I got it. And then even the inconsistencies right now, Hegseth is like, I think it's going to be, probably 8 weeks. And Trump was like, it's any day. And it's just silliness what they're saying. They're saying 6 different things, but they're basically assuring everybody that it's not going to be a forever war. Okay, maybe, but what if we're back in 3 years because it's worse? Is that a forever war? I just think it was very quick by this administration. Early on, they campaigned on everybody. It's one of the problems Megyn Kelly's got. She said, I stood on stage, all these people, and said, we're all supporting no more forever wars. Okay, well, none of them started to be a forever war. They turn into that over time through the people you invade having a say in it. So anyway, the forever war, I hope and pray, because I don't want Americans dying, but I don't want any humans dying. I think it's just a bad plan. It's
Well,
not good.
didn't we end the Russian-Ukrainian conflict on the first day of Trump's new
He
administration?
was supposed to do that in 24 hours, but that was a little more complex. And to your point earlier too, I mean, I think he's a great negotiator. He's done well in business. He's done well on a world stage with a lot of this, but some of these things are a little more complex, and harder to end in 24 hours, even when you start them. So, I guess TBD on if this, goodness, I hope it does not become a long drawn out thing. And I hope we do. But the problem is all the way back to the very beginning. If we don't know what winning is and what are we strategically doing and what is the goal, how the hell do you know when you're supposed to leave? How
Let
do you
me
know
ask
when
you
it's
one
over?
other
When did
thing,
you win?
lest I forget this, because you mentioned something that makes my skin crawl every time I hear it about Trump being a great negotiator. No, he's not. He used to be. But the hubris and the arrogance and the leverage that he used when he was bilking investors and bankers out of money back in New Jersey when he was building his casinos, it doesn't work anymore. No one believes it. Everybody now knows, yeah, that's just Trump. And I just don't think he's negotiated. I don't think anybody's afraid of him. Nobody knows what to believe. And certainly, I think there's the one fear element. You never know what he's going to do, but
Yeah, I mean, it was
I
working on a
just
world stage to an extent for this year. I mean, he again, that's even people who couldn't stand him. You had CNN people who were having to admit some of the things he was doing was working. So I don't think it's as effective as it was. It was working. I think now all of a sudden I don't think it works at all over the next 3 years. I think he's killed any ability to do it because of the inconsistencies in what he's saying. So we can debate whether it was or wasn't working. Even as people who don't like him said it was working well, and you can look at some of the results. I think he's potentially ended all ability to do that because of how this happened. Because you lost a negotiation. You have to say you lost because you weren't able to negotiate it into not being a war with Iran. You know, you're a great negotiator, yet the biggest one that you're working on, trying to get them not to be a nuclear nation, you clearly didn't win because you had to go invade them. So I think that is, to your point, going to hurt it. I do want to hit the Shield of the Americas thing, and I think that was because if you ran on Make America Great Again, no forever wars, you know, this is going to be the most pro-American, America first, all that stuff. And again, through the first, a little over a year, that was what everything looked to be. And it was so refreshing to see somebody focus on this hemisphere because we've sent so many young men and women to die on the other side of the country that most people can't understand, that probably didn't make us any better off, arguably made us a lot worse off, and made a lot of generations of people hate us. So we did, if we didn't have people that hated us over there, we do now. We've built in a couple generations of that to now focus on, from your pole to pole, this hemisphere and making this better and really trying to even invest because China's investing in South America. They're taking South America. They're
yeah,
taking
very
all the
much so.
rare earth metals. So if you want to look at what's the biggest existential threat to the United States, it's not a country that's on the other side of the world. It may be, but they're doing it through our southern border with fentanyl, with the drug cartels, all that stuff's being backed by China. You can just go look at where the money flow is. Then they're taking over South America. So our most existential threat, although it may be a country not located there, it's coming through weaknesses
Right.
in the alliance of this hemisphere. And so to try to fix that and the energy that was being put in and those alliances were being formed, that's one of the things that really annoys me about this whole diversion to the Middle East is it felt like finally we were doing something to really shore up and we could start having economic partnerships and we could start doing things from Canada to South America, pole to pole. And we really could, because you're right. If we got that whole landmass unified and rowing the boat in the same direction, it doesn't really matter what China wants. They can stay over on the
That's
other
right.
side of the world and dominate that side. So it felt like we were getting some good momentum. I do think it's interesting. You mentioned, I know Ecuador's president's got a strong alliance and there's varying degrees, but I find it, and you and I've talked about this a little bit. I find it ironic in Mexico, and it's interesting watching. I don't remember her name, but what their president, what she's doing, and how she's dealing with Trump is she needs help. I mean, they're in a full on civil war right now after they took out the New Jalisco cartel leader. It's awful what's going on in Mexico right now. They need help. But here's what I find. I think it was 38. You and I talked about this when it was going on. It was 38 or 39 presidential candidates who got assassinated. What was magical about is their favorite the cartel's number, their favorite number 39, is that why they stopped with her? Or do you think maybe there was some kind of agreement? It seems weird that they killed 38 or 39 people and then she was good and now she doesn't like Trump because Trump, and I've listened to a lot of podcasts and read a lot about, I know quite a bit about the cartels, and El Chapo his slogan was hugs and drugs. Big philanthropist, similar to Al Capone. Al Capone lived in Miami, was loved in Miami. Didn't like him in Chicago, but loved him in Miami. Same thing with El Chapo. They did not create violence the places they were unless you were in the business or cartels. They invested in schools, local communities. Well, then you arrest him, you've got to avoid. Now, New Jalisco, though, is different. They are very militaristic, ex-military guys, and they kill everybody. Violence is their game. And then you take out their leader, and now you got and Sinaloa owns so much of the just south of the border. So there's all these turf wars. We're the customers in the U.S. So how do you get all the drugs there? But there's all this it's a full on civil war. And then how do you delineate what's the government, what's the cartels? And I just have found it ironic that they stopped with her. And yet she seems to not need any help and she doesn't like Trump. And again, what is our biggest threat? So this is, I'll mess the statistics up. I'll get close. The number of people that were dying of fentanyl related deaths in the United States, that number I believe has gone down by about 50,000 in the last year. So what are Americans dying of? What is a true existential threat to the United States? Things like that, where people are legitimately dying. So the things he's done with, which has put a lot of pressure on Mexico and it's caused some of the problems they've got because it squeezed their cartel economy. But again, focusing in our hemisphere around cartels and things that are legitimately killing American families seemed to be a really good thing. And I thought we were headed down that path. And again, now we're in the middle of a conflict in Iran. So yeah, I agree with you. I
Let
thought
me
that was
ask
a
you.
really good initiative that nobody's, to your point, nobody, no administration in my lifetime that I know of has really tried to do that. And it seemed like a good thing. And now I don't know where that is on the priority list. It's clearly not number one.
Let me ask you this, Carl. Does the United States have a cartel problem or do they have a consumer consumption problem?
But we're the consumer
I mean,
problem.
why are we
Clearly,
throwing all of the
we're the
responsibility? Why are we throwing all of the responsibility on Mexico and Peru and Colombia to stop the flow of traffic of drugs here? And we appear to be doing nothing on this side of the border.
yeah, no, I agree.
If we're spending all this money to stop illegal aliens from crossing the border. Let me tell you, they're not all coming over as mules packing cocaine and fentanyl in. How's it getting in? And why can a country with the resources that we have not stop it? Plus, we have social programs, healthcare programs that have been abandoned to try to fight some of this. I'm not saying that is the total answer, but blowing up speedboats coming from Colombia to the United States is not going to stop the problem.
Personal
It's a
accountability is a
much
beautiful
much
thing,
bigger issue.
and yeah, personal accountability, and you're addressing all of the supply side without looking at all at the consumption side and saying there's a problem there.
Right,
And that
right.
gets it, man.
So
That's a whole nother podcast because why are we the biggest consumers? I bet we could spend 3 hours
absolutely,
talking about the broken things that we're all trying to solve here by you know snorting things and smoking things and whatever. That's a different topic, but there is a
yeah. I think
true issue of
we've uncovered 3 or 4 probably full podcasts of topics here, which is fine. We'll get
yeah.
around to them eventually. I'm anxious to see how the Shield of America actually works.
I hope it doesn't
Mainly
fall apart
because
now.
again, mainly because you and Bob and I were talking about this over a year, well over a year ago, because I was still
Yeah.
in Huntsville at the time. So
Yeah,
that's
I
been
hope
2
it doesn't
years
fall
ago.
apart though. It's a priority that seemed
Yeah.
like a good one that was getting a lot of initiative and now and a lot of traction, but it's clearly not our focus right now. We've been
You know,
distracted.
my one worry is that he stuck Christy Nome there, but, maybe she's just going to be the pinup poster girl.
Yeah, I'm not a
But, I
that's something we
again,
agree on.
it's
I'm not a fan of hers.
so anyway, no, and it's something we'll keep an eye certainly I'll keep an eye on from down here,
Yeah,
because,
you've got a vested
uh
interest.
yeah, I mean, I love my country in the United States. I am an American, I am a US citizen, and I always will be, and it's as often been said, it's not perfect, but it's still better than anything else that's out there. But I love this country that I'm in, resident in now, as
Yep,
their guest, and it's a
yep.
beautiful country. And if the United States can assist in returning this country to where it was a decade ago, that'll be tremendous. And I have faith in our current president, President Noboa here. We'll see how things work out, but certainly something we probably will readdress or revisit months and months down the road anyway.
Yeah, and something you said, and
So
I said it earlier, and I'll say it one more time. The reason I like to engage in a conversation about what's not going perfect with this country is because I love this country. I would die for this country. It is worthy of that. It still is the best experiment in self governance ever, and even on its worst day, um, I believe what Megyn Kelly said. I don't think anybody in this country would knowingly blow up a school full of girls. That's better than a lot of other countries because a lot of other ones would. And so I want to make sure for the however many people end up listening to this, I think you and I both fully agree on this. And you said it. I love this country with everything in me. I would fight for it. I would die for it. My everyday going to work is in defense of this country. And I think that can sometimes get misconstrued if you speak about problems. Some people, because you got to be tribal. Back to our last podcast, you got to be in a tribe, pro this thing, pro that thing, and throw in with this or that. No, I think it's very healthy, and I think it speaks to what our country is that we can have this discussion, and we can question leadership and say, "Man, I don't understand." And not that I hate the leadership, I hate the country, but I just don't understand. It doesn't make sense. There are countries on this planet where you say that and you get shot in the face. So it is still the best country. You know, do we have our issues? Sure. We've fixed a lot of our issues over the years. We've got a long ways to go. And I think it speaks to the fact that you and I can sit here and do a podcast and put it out over the airwaves where we're not being super critical, but we're asking questions just to try to understand why things are what they are. Love the country. It's great. I think for it to exist for another 250 years though, people need to wake up and ask questions and not just go along with what's going on because things, including countries, don't. The trend is not for them just to magically become better and for them to become freer and for liberty to become a bigger commodity. All the trend is the opposite of that. So I think it's healthy for us to have reasonable discussions and question why is leadership doing what they're doing. And good leaders should be okay with that too, and they should be able to answer the questions
Absolutely.
without getting
Yes.
mad and without just telling you to shut up. They should be able to give you a legitimate answer as to why they're doing what they're doing. And again, I think that's where we've got a little bit of an issue right now is there aren't very clear, at least that I've heard, answers of why we are doing this whole thing with Iran. It seems a little muddy at best. So hopefully it'll get cleared up. As I talk to my mom every day on the way to work, the thing that brings me a lot of hope, and I will go to sleep and sleep very well tonight, is that Jesus is still king, and no matter what all
That's
these
right.
worldly leaders are doing, our fate is sealed, and He's our king. So that makes me rest well at night. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be involved and talk about all this stuff that affects the world too.
Right. You know, our 70 or 80 years on this planet pale in comparison to eternity with Christ. So helps us make it
Yep,
through it
I
and
agree.
put things in the proper perspective. So,
Absolutely,
all right. Well, listen, this has been great. Once again, great talking with you on this. I'm looking forward to next week. I'm not even sure what it's about. We'll figure it out, but
absolutely.
look forward to it.
Good discussion. I think we got to find something though. I think unfortunately, this one was closer to the 98.2 podcast instead of the 85.15. So we're otherwise college football will definitely get us into the 15. So we'll figure out
Definitely.
that.
Yeah,
But a good discussion. Again though, Randy, I think looking at why we did this thing, I think you and I probably both came to this thinking we were going to disagree with more, but I think it's amazing I think if we would have had to have had this discussion in 10 minutes, we would have disagreed a lot. I think the fact that we've
probably.
been able to do it over an hour and 23 minutes or whatever it is, I think it allowed us to have a respectful discussion about things and find out that we agree on most of this. And I think that's going to be intriguing if our podcast started out as 8515 and through a lot of long form discussions, we end up agreeing on more than we disagree. I think that will probably circle back around and prove the point of why we did this. So I think it's good.
Absolutely.
All
All
right.
right. Well, I'll let
Until
you get
next
back to the
week,
family then. All right.
good
Sounds
stuff.
good. You have a great one, brother.
Talk
Love you.
soon. You as well. Love you.